Hi there, and welcome back to a Typical T Settlement Showcase. Starting with the road layout, I'll take you on a whistle-stop tour of how I put this design together and share a few tips along the way where I think the design could be further improved upon in your own playthroughs. I hope you enjoyed this Angerdorf-inspired build, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. But without any further ado, let's get started. I've started on the coast here with a little proto-settlement, and I suggest that you do the same. Onto the road layout. So I've started here on the brand new Twin Lakes map, and I'm kind of marking out here where I want to build the Angerdorf, which of course essentially is a big oval in my interpretation of what the design looks like anyway. So I build a road right here, almost on a diagonal. It's not quite in the right place, so I do go back and build this on a slightly different angle, and I'm just trying to get it so that it sits nicely between the top and bottom King's Roads, and that looks pretty good. So from there, I'm going to go to our favourite tool, and that is, of course, the corpse pit. Now, I've taken a position roughly in the centre of our line, and I've spaced it off from the edge by about half a corpse pit in width. Then I've deleted the road I put in as a guide, and I'll pop in a corpse pit above it. So the idea is that road we just put and deleted is running right through the centre of that corpse pit. There we are. So now I'm going to build out to the sides of the first corpse pit, making sure that the new one is perfectly aligned and parallel to the first, and we'll just put down some corpse pits to either side, and this is going to be the start of our Angerdorf. These corpse pits form the central line of the oval we're going to make and help with spacing, so this is the most important bit, getting these all nicely lined up together. So counting those out, you should end up with 8 corpse pits all in a line together. With your 8 corpse pits, you're going to take another corpse pit and, using the entrance area with a road connection point, line that up right with the centre line. You're going to build 2 off from the centre. Again, keeping them nice and close and as parallel as possible, line up that road dot with the dotted lines in between the 2 central corpse pits and build 2 off the top as well. You can do everything in one go on one side, but I tend to build a little bit in parallel to make sure that I'm not forgetting how to do things. Take a road, snap to the 2 end corpse pits, and if you do like I've done here, you get too close to the top corpse pit, it's not going to curve the line, and you want your road curve to be just above the C on the road curve tool. So you'll see there it's an angle as opposed to a curve, and that's because I've got too close to that top corpse pit. So I'll delete that line, and this time, taking from that point, I'm going to click slightly shy of that dotted line, and you'll see when I do that, I get a really nice curve. So those top and bottom corpse pits, as they were, are really there to give you an idea of where that central click needs to be. And there we have it. And that is the start of our oval structure. We can now move to delete the 2 end corpse pits. We'll delete that and connect the top and bottom semicircles to start making our oval. We'll then add a corpse pit onto the end, snap to the centre of the road we just built, build a small road off the end and delete the corpse pit. And then just connect the ends of your semicircles where you've got the connecting road up to the end to form a triangle just where those roads meet, like so. And then we'll repeat that process on the other end. Delete the corpse pit, join the 2 semicircles, add another corpse pit in the centre, build a road off from the end road connection point of that corpse pit, delete the corpse pit, and then connect your oval with 2 roads, 2 individual roads, so you don't get any weird corner turning at the end connection point. Once again, returning to our corpse pit tool, we're going to cover both of the outside semicircles with corpse pits, starting from the centre where we already have one and working your way out. We'll do that on the bottom and we'll do that on the top. It's important to start from the middle, because if you don't do that, you won't have even spacing. You'll see here I have to place this one manually because it's snapping, but it's not quite as close on the corner as some of the others were. So if that happens, just get in here with the manual adjustment, line it up as best you can and make sure the corners are touching. And again, doesn't want to snap in the right place, so I'm going to end up placing it manually. You'll get a feel for how close they should be together based on how closely the others have snapped together already. And you'll see I'm checking there and it is a little bit too far away. So I'm going to go back and place it a little bit closer. And it's looking a bit corpse pity at the moment. There's certainly a lot around. Of course, do remember you need to do this while the game is paused, or you're going to have a lot of corpse pits and not a lot of fun, I'd imagine. Of course, you might not find this fun at all, in which case it's just me, isn't it? But that's fine. I'm okay with that. So then, using the corpse pit tool again, shock horror, you're going to align it with the two outsides on the semicircles, and you'll have to rotate the tool, and you're going to line up the road connection point. You might have to adjust the angle a little bit so that there's two on those. And then the central one as well, you're also going to space out with a second corpse pit, making sure that it is like the ones on the outside, and you're leaving a gap for the road connection point so that it is spaced evenly. You won't always have a road connection point on the central corpse pit, so you might have to guesstimate how close you need to be. It's all relative when it comes to accuracy. With these tools, you just get as close as you can. I'm going to go ahead now and delete the corpse pits here because we don't need those anymore. You could do this after this step, but I'm just doing it now to get it out of the way. I'm just replacing the central corpse pit here, just to make sure that I know where that center line is later on, and I may have to end up placing this manually to do so. So don't delete your center corpse pit. Once you've replaced that central corpse pit, take the woodcutter's lodge and place it just shy of where the road would be, and this is going to be your central point for the next curve. This is very similar to that first curve we did, where we're using a central structure that doesn't have a road snapping point, in this case, to allow us to guesstimate where the curve needs to be. We'll now replace those inside corpse pits. They were in the way when we were drawing the curve, but we do need them now to draw the outside lines. So once we've got those placed, we're just going to put a couple of lines that roughly match the dotted lines of those corpse pits and connect in with the end of the first semicircle. And that's just going to give us a nice consistent endpoint to both sides of our Angerdorf. Make sure that you snap that in nice and close to the corpse pits and use the dotted line on the outside of those corpse pits to line up the road. And do that on all four corners. Now we're going to delete that top corpse pit on the top side of our Angerdorf, and we're going to repeat what we did down the bottom. So we're going to take a woodcutter's lodge, we're going to leave a gap for a road, as if there were one, between the first corpse pit and that, and then we'll delete all of the corpse pits on the inside edge. And those we're getting rid of because they'll be in the way of creating a nicely curved road. And starting from the snap point of the top corpse pit that we left, clicking just shy of the woodcutter's lodge, and then to the second snap point to generate that lovely curve. And once again, using the curve tool, I tend to have it set so that the yellow bar lines up with the C. And that tends to give me a nice gentle curve over this distance of road. I'm just going to go ahead then and connect the ends of each of these roads with a straight road, it's only a small section, back to that outside line that we drew earlier. With those in place, what we need to do now is set up the outside curve. This proved a little tricky, so what I've done here is I've placed two corpse pits on either end, two in the centre, and then spaced one so we can get this road in between. And then we're forming a little H shape. And what we're doing here is we're positioning roads so that we get some nice consistent snap points on either end. So we'll draw a road down the side, then delete it, and we'll do the same over here. And what that's doing is that the road we're drawing now is going to end in exactly the same place on both sides. I play around a little bit with how we do this road here. I'll just delete those as well. So we've got two road points to connect to that are the same on both sides. So the straight line doesn't look quite right. We do need to have a kink or a curve in it. The curve is a little difficult, I think, to get accurate. I guess you could measure off the center of the curve below, but I just didn't feel that it looked right. So in the end, I ended up taking the curve off entirely. And then I just did a single kink in the middle and snapped it across, and by the time you're getting this far out on the oval, it's a pretty negligible curve on the line anyway. So I found really that just the one kink point here gave me something that was fairly consistent from side to side without being too difficult to achieve, while looking good enough basically. So on this side, I decided to put a little road in the center off a straight line, just so it can give me a bit of more of a reference point for creating the curve, but that's how you do the outside curve. Repeating this on the top side, we'll get rid of that woodcutter's lodge. So we've got our 2 corpse bits on either side of the curve. On the center we've got 2, a space for a road, and then another one. And then we'll draw a little H shape with our roads, so that central road finishes at exactly the same point on either side of the corpse bits. And we'll do the same here, so that start of our curve starts and finishes in exactly the same place, no matter which end of the oval of the Angerdorf you are at. And then using the camera nice and high so you get a decent top-down view, just snap a kinked line across like so. Perfect. And it should give you that shape there. That's given us the basic structure for our Angerdorf. We're just going to shorten these outside lines. We drew these in roughly earlier so that we could have some lines to work to, but now we're going to reduce the length of them so that they line up with the outer edge of the curve. Do that to all 4. You could drag those even further down if you wanted to and connect them all the way to the King's Road, but at this stage I just wanted to make sure that I got the initial structure of my version 2 Angerdorf correct. So I snapped them all to the same place, thinking that I can easily add and draw on a line later. And then it's a case of getting rid of all of your corpse bits, because we're done with those now. You can also get rid of the road going through the very centre of your Angerdorf. That we're going to build the church round anyway, and we're just going to eyeball where we put that, as you'll see later on. Now on my last Angerdorf build, that's basically where I left it as far as roads were concerned, but this time I decided I wanted something a little bit more consistent to either side of the Angerdorf and to kind of complete the shape that we have. To do that, I started by drawing a line from the top outside edge of the curve to the bottom edge of the curve. I did that on both ends, trying to keep that symmetry, making sure I'm snapping onto the very ends of the road. And once I'd done that, it was a case of drawing a line right out through the centre, from one end to the other, so that we knew it was perfectly lined up with our Angerdorf. And from there, using that road we've just drawn as a reference point and trying to keep it dead centre between the 2 white lines of the road we're building, we'll start at the top, bring it all the way down and draw a long road out. We'll repeat that process from the top, pulling it down the other way. Once again, you're using the white outside lines to try and line up with the centre of the road that's already there, and that's how you know it's nice and straight. And I'm just checking there to see that there aren't any roads overlapping each other that are obviously wrong. So I'm pretty sure that's what I want it to look like, and it's nice and straight. Those roads we are going to need to delete later, but we'll deal with that when it comes to it, which is the advantage of doing everything in advance. What I'm doing now is I'm building down corpse bits on that central line we've just put there. So we'll put down nice and tight together 5 of those, and we'll do that on both sides, making sure they're lined up and connected to endpoints there. Delete those corpse bits because they're just going to get in the way now. That's given us a consistent endpoint that we can match on the other end. And from the end of those roads we built, we're just going to connect them with a straight line to the outside edge of our curve. And that's going to give us a nice end to our Angerdorf that ties in with the overall theme. And if you zoom out here, you'll see it curves around nicely and then goes to that straight point, almost like a bit of a boat shape. Some of you will know, Boatlandia was a settlement I dearly loved that is long since past. But let's not get caught up on past typical. This is current typical, and he has got corpse bits to place, so we'll of course focus on that primarily. So there we go, 5 corpse bits once again, making sure they snap together nice and closely, so they're nice and consistent. I have noticed that sometimes, depending on the direction the corpse bit is, it'll snap in a slightly different orientation, so sometimes a manual placement is going to make life a little bit easier. And this is where I start to wish that there was a group delete tool. I'm pretty fed up of clicking the delete button nice and carefully by the time I'm done with one of these builds. We'll connect those roads up. Splendid. Check they meet nicely. and then decide you don't care and zoom out to check that the shape looks good, and I'm pretty happy with how that's looking so far. The Eye of Sauron is certainly approving. We'll delete those reference lines we put in earlier that we didn't really end up using, but we won't talk about that too much. There's a tip, you don't need that line. And now I'm starting to think about where I'm going to put this church. Do I want to put it in a corner? Absolutely not. It needs to be in the centre, like in the first Angerdorf build, so that idea goes straight out the window, and pretty soon I decide we're going to delete those roads. And there we have it. With a click of the fingers, they're gone, leaving us a nice open central space. I've also deleted the roads running right through the centre. To do that, all you need to do is decide where the road's going to finish, and then start a road from that point, overlap the road you've already built, and then you can delete the original road, having used it as a reference to build the real road, if that makes any sense whatsoever. We're nearly through the tedious road building now. What I've done here is I've set up some logging camps, and now I'm putting down some hitching posts, and this is out to the right hand side of the Angerdorf. You can do it to either side of yours depending on where you want to have your forestry areas, but you are going to need a fair bit of timber for the coming construction. So I tend to find building this first with your settlement camp nearby just helps you get going a little bit faster, and it's also part of the industry area that I tend to keep outside of the central Angerdorf itself. For the church, like I said, I tend to pop it directly in the middle, and that's what I've done here, and then I go ahead and surround that with a few roads. Now, the church building itself isn't central to the square plot that it goes inside of, so if you really wanted to be particular about it, as I am with my roads, you see me deleting the road there and then deciding to go with my typical installation of a few guide roads so I can get consistent endpoints, you could decide to place the church in such a way as to have the actual building aligned with the Angerdorf. I think that might look quite nice and might be something I explore in the next Angerdorf build. But when you're putting yours together, that's something that you could consider. I'm not sure it's that easy to see with the preview exactly which way the church is going to be pointing, but that's something I'll let you antagonize over. I'm not too bothered that the church itself doesn't align with the Angerdorf, but if I had the option in the game of being able to rotate it around, then I'm sure I would. Planet Coaster style. I think if the game was that in depth with moving things around, I really would never get anything done. Let alone getting past the road building stage. From there, I put out 4 granaries and 4 storehouses in the corners. You could have more than these. I did find later on in the build that I was lacking granary and storehouse space in the centre of the Angerdorf, just because of the population density we end up within this one being quite a lot higher than we had in the first Angerdorf build. So if I was doing this again, I'd probably recommend possibly adding an additional 2 storehouses and granaries. You'll see me there committing sacrilege as I build over some mushrooms, but never fear, I don't care. When it comes to building your market stalls, initially I went with either side of the church, and it stayed like that through most of my playthrough. However, there was a stage where things were getting very inefficient, and I did a job wipe where I unassigned everyone from their jobs and then reassigned everyone, so that we got people working at projects and jobs that were much closer to where they lived. In the process of that, the market stalls moved to other market locations I had just outside of the Angerdorf, so they end up positioned at either end of the Angerdorf as opposed to the centre. And actually, given where most of the housing and the storage is, that makes more sense. When it comes to placing your first row of Burgage plots, I've put, I think it's 11 in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, no, 10. It's 10 on the inside and 11 on the outside. So that's our first 10 Burgage plots. Snap of fingers, there they are. So that's your dense population on the inside ring. And then on the outside ring is where we're going to put our farms, so our vegetable plots and our orchards as well. As I said, on the outside edge it's 11 Burgage plots, and on the inside edge it's 10. You've got space for 4 of these larger Burgage plot quadrants and 4 of the denser populated ones, which again is quite different to the first Angerdorf build I did, which I think was 3 large and 2 small. So this gives you a lot more production in terms of meats, animal extensions, animal pens, etc. And also gives you a bit more space to have artisan families that don't take up your entire population base to make shoes, for example. I then put some farms. I put 3 farms in each of the kind of outside corners of the Angerdorf. And these are going to be to service the farms that eventually will surround this Angerdorf. Something I really like from the real life Angerdorfs that I've seen, and the layouts of those medieval settlements, is the long fields that run out from each outside area of the Angerdorf from the dwellings. Once again on the other side, I'm mirroring what I've done, so I've got a row of small Burgage plots, a row of larger ones. You can see I've forgotten how many I put down. It's 11. So we'll go ahead and spread these out over here. And like I said, you're going to struggle for resources as the game really gets going, even with all those additional logging camps I put down earlier. So I wait around here for a little bit to place these. With those under construction, you quickly move on to the next. I think it took me probably 3 hours of playthrough before I'd filled up the Angerdorf with its initial settlement. It may have taken a little bit longer as well. I do tend to find as well with this design of Angerdorf, I was struggling for capacity, so I did have to expand further out across the map later on. So here we go, this is the Angerdorf mostly built out. Now with the longer ends of the Angerdorf here, you do have space for more Burgage plots, and that's something that I did find I was in need of. So fortunately with these large flanks, there is space to put down some additional Burgage plots along that central line, which again, like the real Angerdorfs I've seen, you do tend to get a kind of an ellipse in the middle, which is the eye shape of the Angerdorf, where you have the church or the village green. And then you'll continue to have Burgage plots along the roads either side. So this is another nice development compared to our first Angerdorf design. To do this, I went for our favourite measuring tool, of course, the corpse bit, and I placed out 8 of them on either end. I think I did have to move a couple of buildings. I think in this case there was just a stable that was slightly in the way of the top row on the left hand side here. Now these 4 corpse bits on either side of the road, so 8 in total on each end of the Angerdorf, are going to give us position or placement for more of the small Burgage plots that we can use for the animal pens, for some apiaries, and also for artisanal production. So you don't really want to have your house that's got 4 families in it producing shoes, because you're probably wasting some of those families. I tend to rather keep those families producing workers for other areas, and I keep the smaller crafts like the shoemakers and the clothiers, I tend to have in a single width Burgage plot. It's not actually as much of an issue as it used to be, because in the new version of the game, the latest update, you can see as I'm moving one of the stables here, the number of families per upgrade of plot doesn't actually double. So you're not losing that many more people, and when you have an expansion space on a Burgage plot, that's only one expansion spot for one family, regardless of the level of plot, so that isn't doubling per upgrade as well. So it used to be the case that if you had a well upgraded Burgage plot, that if you suddenly change the production from, let's say, an animal pen in the back to producing shoes, you could potentially lose 6 families from your available workers, which would kind of decimate your ad hoc worker population that you use for farming, etc. So I've just surrounded these corpse bits with roads in a square pattern, and I'll go ahead and delete those corpse bits. And this is going to significantly increase the number of dwellings that we can have within our Angerdorf, which of course is going to help, especially in the short term, when we're not necessarily getting as many property level upgrades as we will later on. So we're relying on building new Burgage plots as opposed to getting additional living space from the Burgage plots that we already have by extending them. And it's going to be a really straightforward setup for inside these 4 boxes that we've made. We're just going to take the Burgage plot tool and draw a really easy square or rectangle. And that's going to give us an additional 11 Burgage plots per side, so 22 per end of the Angerdorf, 44 in total. So you can see we've jumped forward a bit and I filled all of those out. And now we're going on to fields. Now I did go through a couple of iterations of the fields. Initially they were very long fields and they extended all the way to the King's Road. However, I was finding with those that they weren't being fully sown by the time the sowing season came to an end, and they were becoming a real pain to harvest. We weren't getting everything out of them. So I decided to go for a smaller, or shorter rather, field that still kind of suited the traditional Angerdorf style layout that I've seen in the past, but that was easier for our population to deal with. To do that, we're going to use, you guessed it, corpse bits. So I've put a couple on the outside here. You can see I've actually done on the mirror side of the Angerdorf, I've already done the grid layout over there. But I'm just going to take a couple of roads coming off from the centre Angerdorf. The ones that matter really are the central lines and the one I'm doing now, these two on either side. So I'm lining those up with the end roads we have on the end of our Burgage plots for the centre of the Angerdorf already. We're going to place that in there and then have 3 corpse pits running off on that line and 3 corpse pits on the centre line as well. And that's going to give us our marked position for the outside road for our fields. I didn't quite have space on the left here because of where the King's Road was to get a 3rd corpse pit in, so I've just built it slightly off to the side to give me the right dimension in terms of how far I'm coming out from the outer curve of the Angerdorf. And similar to what we did with the outer curve of the main Angerdorf, I'm just going to use the straight line road tool and put a small kink in it, kind of lining up with the kink we did previously, and draw that across as the outside line of where our fields are going to go, and you'll see it matches there on the top and bottom of the left hand side of our Angerdorf. With that done, we can delete those corpse pits. So this is something you can do right from the get-go. You could even plan this out with the roads at the very start when you're doing your road planning, instead of after you've built up some of your Burgage plots. I've done it later on. I'm actually doing this much later on because, like I said, I've swapped out my original fields for some smaller ones. I play around with this little road at the end here just to make sure that I kind of make it parallel to the Angerdorf structure itself. It takes me a few attempts to get there. As always with road building in this game, try and zoom out and be as top down as you possibly can. It's not a perfect top down view, but the closer you get, the easier it is to have a road that lines up properly. Now I tried to make these fields small. That's kind of for 2 reasons. One, like I say, is for ease of harvesting, and the other is because, like I say, on traditional Angerdorfs that I've seen images of, the fields are long and narrow. So I tend to keep these somewhere between 0.3 and 0.5 Morgan. They don't tend to go any larger than that. And that kind of matches up with the width of the Burgage plots in there as well, which I think is quite nice as well. Doesn't have to perfectly match them. Part of, again, the original Angerdorfs that I've seen is that they're not a modern New York style grid system. They're not perfect. So having a bit more fluidity, I suppose, in these outside fields is nice. I mean, if we could, it'd be nice to see, more than 4 snap points for fields. You can do some curves by building roads out first, but having a few more options for the shapes of fields, I think, would be nice. So I'm just going to fill out each of these spaces here, and then I'll do this all the way around for all of my existing fields as well. And there we have it. This is the version 2 Angerdorf. You've got much higher density of accommodation space. There are many more Burgage plots. You've got 2 full rings as well, with a inner ring of small Burgage plots and an outer ring of larger ones. And that's a big improvement, I think, from the original Angerdorf that I did. In the original, you had a nice central green section, but there was a limited number of Burgage plots. And I think this playthrough in the end, I had about 1,200 people living on the map as a whole. That was just in this one region, but did include some expansions outside of this Angerdorf to try and supply everyone. I have also found in this playthrough that getting to level 4 is much harder than it used to be. Even with all these fields and let me tell you, a lot of pigs and goats, I was struggling to get enough meat, and there isn't any domestic meat production on this area on this map anyway. I didn't have fish, for example, and that would have gone a long way to making things a little bit easier. As you see here, I've got my normal crop rotation, which is wheat, barley and flax. And when it's all grown up and it's that time of year before harvest, the Angerdorf really does come into its own, I think. You've got the trees and the vegetable plots, and you've got your outer fields, and it feels like a well-designed, but natural as well, settlement. I did get a few level 4 Burgage plots, as you can see on the right-hand side there, but for the most part it was level 3. That's all we have time for today, friends. I hope you found this useful, entertaining, and I'd love to hear about your own Angerdorfs or any improvements that you think you would make or changes. But for now, until next time, cheerio.
the sea.